Today we're going to be taking a close look at the new Audi RS3, the baby RS. Up front, well, the first thing that grabs my attention is this new mask that goes around the front grille. It's very glossy now. It's again, I think, in line with the design that they've been doing. I saw this kind of a design first with the Audi Q8, but I really like this. It's a lot more menacing, a lot more pronounced. It seems to be coming out forward because it's like, for example, the Audi logo is significantly further ahead from the end of the bonnet. Speaking of the logo, it is completely blacked out, as is most of the entire bumper. Very glossy, but slightly different shades of black, which help it pop. Another thing that pops is the color. This is one of the exclusive colors for the RS3. It's the Kulami green. There's also another gray. I think it looks really nice, very lime green in my eyes. It's also interesting to note some of the new aerodynamic channels that they have with this new design. There's also some fun stuff with the lighting, so let's take a look at that. So here we have the key fob, and why I'm showing you this now is because look at this cool little graphic. When I unlock the RS3, you get that little cascading light effect, but then it spells out RS3, and then these LED lights here change to a race flag checkered pattern. How cool is that? Let's take a look at the side profile. So we have a wider track, lowered sports suspension. Speaking of which, you also get the DCC, the adaptive dampers. They've also stiffened a lot of the linkages, as well as increased the camber, the negative camber, by up to a degree, which should help maintain a better contact patch with the road at high-speed cornering. I also like these 19-inch wheels with this Y-spoke design and these little cool stickers at the end. You get 6-piston brakes with steel rotors as standards, but also you can get the ceramic rotor if you wish. I always like a red caliper. As we move along the side, it still retains that Audi A3 silhouette. You have a very smooth roofline, a strong crease here in the front, that black contrasting mirror cap, as well as the contrasting black frame around the windows really help. It's tied together with this black roof, as well as the black skirts in the bottom. Towards the back, now this being the sedan, it's a very sloping roofline. It's almost like a fastback, which is interesting because you also get a hatchback version of this, which is not available in all markets. Here at the rear, I really like this 3/4 view. It's got a nice haunch around the shoulders, again because of that wider track. A very subtle spoiler here. I would just say it's a lip spoiler, but I like that it's in contrasting black color along with the Audi logo. It's a nice combination of black and green. The lights are very horizontal, again LED, and they have interesting cascading functions as well. As we go further down, you get a little bit of contrast here. It's just purely cosmetic. These are not hollow, so there's no aerodynamics in this section. But there is a large diffuser. By the way, the sports exhaust now also has a variable valve system, so you can change based on the mode, the sound and the flow of the exhaust notes. Oh boy, I'm really excited to take a look at this because hidden underneath this is such a unique engine, a gem of an engine. And that is because this is a very unique 5-cylinder inline arrangement. So this is a 2.5 liter inline 5 turbocharged petrol engine. This makes 400 PS, and now in the new generation makes a little bit more torque, so 500 Newton meters of peak torque. This comes mated with a 7-speed DSG, which is a dual clutch transmission. This is the same platform in the VW group that is shared with the Golf R, for example. So that's why it is a front-wheel drive platform. But this is Audi Quattro, and it's also a on-demand based, coupling-based all-wheel drive system with the new RS torque splitter, and we'll talk more about that because it's really interesting. This can launch the RS3 from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 3.8 seconds and a Vmax of 290 kilometers per hour. Impressive numbers. Let's take a look inside the car. Door opens fairly wide. It's got a nice heft, a nice door closing sound. Pretty solid. Materials are very nice. So soft touch material. It's quite monotone, it's quite black. You do have a bit of dash of color here. Of course, ambient lighting. Switchgear feels pretty solid. Nothing too fancy or different, but on the inside, if we take a closer look, You kind of get that exterior accent color, so in this case that green, in little dashes here and there, and that also makes it feel a lot more special. So let's hop inside and get a quick first impression. So yeah, the posture and the seating position is fairly sporty. You can put the seat down fairly low. You have a lot of adjustments. These seats are the optional leather seats, but you can get Alcantara seats, and I think it's a little bit more comfortable, and you can be a little bit more kinder to animals. The steering wheel itself has a really nice grip, flat bottom, RS logo, nothing new, but I also like the fact that there is a little strip here to kind of help you position it when you're doing those drifts with that new torque split. The aircon vents also have that dash, which I really like, but overall, it's a fairly neat cabin, but there's some exciting new things to talk about, like the head-up display and the virtual cockpit. So why don't you hop inside and let's take a closer look. The steering wheel also has a lot of functions that you can use to control the menu up here on the virtual cockpit, the digital instruments. And what's really nice to see is there is also a RS button, and this is the button to select the driving mode. There are also paddle shifters for the 7-speed DSG, cold metal, which I really like. It has a lot more a sense of occasion about it compared to plastic paddle shifters. They are fairly small, I must say, but once we get our chance to drive the car, we can test out how that feels. There is also a very nice head-up display now, which shows you critical information. And again, once we have our hands on the car to test it, we can tell you more about that. But overall, the design is fairly neat. It has a sense of purpose about it with these high-set air conditioning vents. I like this dash of green color. And as we go further to the right-hand side, we see the touchscreen infotainment system. You have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto wireless connectivity, which is very useful. It doesn't have a haptic feedback, but the click sound actually is the same kind of click sound you get in some of the bigger Audis like the Q7 and the Q8, where there is a little bit of a haptic feedback. So it makes that same sound, and to me, somehow it tricks my mind into thinking that I'm feeling something as well. But it's fairly useful, very intuitive to use, very slick. And further down, I'm always happy to see that there are actual buttons, at least for controlling the climate control over here. So you do still have a rocker for the volume, for example, or rather the settings here. But overall, buttons are still better than no buttons at all. We have further hotkey buttons down here for the drive select, as well as the parking assist systems. A couple USB charging ports and an inductive phone charger, so useful. And as we've seen in the past with the VW Group cars, they shift by wire system. And look at this. This is like a nice touchpad for changing the volume. I used to have something like this on my old iPod Classic. Do you guys remember those? It was like a big bar of soap and had a nice touch-sensitive trackpad. So cool to see that coming back. I would take this over a touchscreen any day. I think it's still okay if there's no actual knob. And last but not least, down here you have an electronic parking brake along with a 12-volt power socket. This new RS also comes with some interesting new driving modes. So along with efficiency, comfort, auto, and dynamic, you have an RS individual, RS performance, and RS torque rear, which is a very German way of saying drift mode. All right, let's go take a look at the back seat. So the door opens actually fairly wide, and that goes to show that while this is a performance small sedan, it is quite practical because you can bring your child seats in fairly easily. You do have ISOFIX points to mount them. The texture and that contrast stitching and the pattern that you saw in the front seat is also here in the rear seats. And check out the contour of the backrest itself. So they're still very performance oriented in a way that it seems to be having a lot more side bolstering. So your passengers in the back seat won't go flying around when you are, making the best use of that torque differential. There's a handle here if you need help to get in. And, well, yeah, not too bad, I would say. This seat is set to my driving position. I'm about 1.73 meters or 5'8" roundabout, and this is set to my driving position. With the seat not completely on the floor, I have place to slide my feet under the front seat. I have just about enough headroom. And We don't have a big panoramic sunroof in this case, so the mechanism for the smaller sunroof is kind of tucked away here, so it does eat up into a little bit of the headroom and the visibility. Also, the entire cabin is fairly black, which kind of makes it seem even more smaller, but it is a sporty sedan, and that's kind of what you can expect. But definitely, it's very practical. We have more air conditioning vents, along with a couple USB-C ports, an armrest, so yeah, definitely something you can live with very easily. So practicality continues here in the sedan, and of course with the hatchback, you can expect different geometry in the trunk, but the boot lid opens very easily. It's nice and damped, padded. Again, very important for sound deadening, because a lot of the sound comes from the rear axle and from this big air actually. The trunk is pretty good, but I must say the height that you're getting is quite limited here in the sedan. And again, if you're in a market where you get the hatchback and even more practicality is important, that's where that would score, because this height, let's face it, is not very good. But you have a lot more, you have a very rectangular area that you can store things. Not much really under here that you can make use of, just a little bit here and there, because we see a lot more of the, like for example, the battery here in the back. But if you need more space, you can fold the seats down, not from back here, but actually from inside. You can fold the seat in a 40, 20, and 40 fashion. The Audi RS3 will be available here in Germany starting mid-August 2021. The starting price is around 60,000 euros. Of course, also here in Germany, you can get this. This is the Sportback version compared to the sedan that we just saw earlier. And I must say, I think this red is a little bit more striking. And I also do like the proportions of the Sportback more than the sedan. What do you guys think? Put it down in the comments below. The front part is pretty much identical between the two siblings, as you would expect. But the real changes start as we go towards the C-pillar, because over here, the roofline is significantly different as it continues, and you have this little spoiler at the top here, and then you have this hatchback, or rather should I say Sportback in this case. This is a lot more practical, like we saw in the sedan. The actual area in the trunk, the height that you have is significantly less compared to, well, take a look at this. I mean, there is such a wide opening. And it's also easier to access the seat latches to tumble the seats from back here if you need to. So if practicality is really what's important for you, maybe the hatchback is the version you need. As you can expect, because this is red on the outside, you also have quite a bit of red on the inside. The similar optional leather sport seats with this pattern, but of course the contrast stitching now is in red. Likewise, you have red dashes along the dashboard, as well as a red stripe on the top of the steering wheel. I also found something really interesting. Take a look at this number plate. Of course, Deutschland, Ingolstadt, where the headquarters of Audi is, RS3, third generation, serial number 1. So this is Genesis right here. And that's because actually the Sportback, this is the third generation, but the sedan over there, this is only the second generation. So if you guys could pick one, which one would it be? Now, at first glance, it might seem similar to some of the other systems we've seen in the past, like GKN Twinster from the Ford Focus RS, or the system in the Opel Insignia GSI, or some of the Jaguar Land Rover cars, but this is in fact quite different. In the past, the RS3 and of course the other cars on this platform, like the Golf R, had a Haldex system with a singular clutch, and then the differential would be behind that. So you would activate and deactivate the drive to the entire rear axle. But in this case, what you can see is you have two separate clutch packs for each of the rear wheels. So drive comes in from here, from the engine, and then it gets transferred to these two clutch packs. And the differential in the speed itself is achieved by how much these clutch packs are engaged and disengaged. There's a worm gear with an actuator which will rotate this gear, which has a ball and ramp to compress and decompress these clutch packs. The front axle remains open differential, and it has a brake-based torque vectoring, but in combination with this, you get a really versatile all-wheel drive system. But make sure you click on the link below to watch our first teaser episode where we got to test the prototype, at least sitting as a passenger, to get a feel of the new differential in the rear and of course experience a little bit of that glorious 5-cylinder engine. Be sure to subscribe because very soon we will have our full test video of this car where we get to drive it out on some nice roads and tell you what it's really all about.